Hi, I'm author, speaker, and writer's coach Teresa Funke, back with some tips to get your writing career on a path that's right for you. Now today I want to talk about the 5 things your character needs. The first thing is an obvious one. Your character needs a look. Now when it comes to description of characters, the question I get asked the most often is how much description do we need to do? Is there a right or wrong answer? And the reality is it's completely up to the writer. I always tell my writers to play to their strengths at all times. If description is one of your strengths, then you should definitely be doing more description. And you'll know that because people are always commenting on how you describe a sunset better than anyone else. Or they can always picture so clearly everything that you write. That means you're probably good at description. If so, you are naturally going to gravitate towards heavy description anyway in your writing. If that's the case, make sure of 2 things. 1, that you don't use cliches, and 2, that you don't make simple statements. So avoid terms like, she had raven black hair. Now, writers who are great at description can often create these visions of characters that include facial expression and movements and create such a clear picture of a character that it's as stunning as a photograph. And that's wonderful if you are able to do that. If description is not your strength, you do not have to do paragraphs and paragraphs of description. But what you do need to do is have a clear picture in your mind of what your character looks like and be able to communicate that in some way to us on the page. What you also want to think about is making sure that the descriptions that you include of your character relate back to her worldview or to things that are important to her. So for example, if she hates the fact that she's tall, you want to make sure that you let us know that she's tall because that affects the way she behaves in her story. Some writers, myself included, who choose not to go heavy on description do so partly purposefully because we believe it's more fun for our readers to imagine the characters in the way that they choose to imagine them. Plus, it's also kind of fun to think of it this way. The less description you do, the easier it is to cast the actress in that role in the movie, right? The second thing your character needs is a backstory. Your character can and should have had a life that came before the story you are currently writing. And you want to explore that backstory to learn how she was raised, what things affected her worldview, what things are troubling her. You might also have to look at what was going on in her town or her culture that might have affected the way she developed. And you need to know everything about your character's past in order to create a well-rounded character. Now, how much of her backstory makes it to the page is completely up to you. Sometimes as writers, when we're exploring a character's backstory, we think of a storyline that relates to their past that we can tie into their current story, and that actually helps us develop a better story. But just as often, what we discover about our character's past never makes it to the page at all, or is mentioned only fleetingly. It all depends on what your current story requires. Now, what I would suggest here is that you try to avoid what I call info dumps. Now, info dumps are a paragraph or 2 paragraphs or, God forbid, an entire chapter where you just state her past and tell us every detail that you think we need to know about her past. That can slow down your story and bore the reader with details that are not relevant to your current story. What you reveal is directly related to what your character hopes to gain in this story. And I'm going to get to a little more of that in just a moment. The third thing your character needs is a strength and a weakness, or a flaw if you prefer. Now, in every story we have 2 different kinds of conflict, internal and external conflict. External conflict may be a war raging around your character, or maybe a boss or a teacher who is out to get him. But internal conflict is often more interesting. It's the battles that wage within us. And these often come from developing a character's strengths and their weaknesses. So a strength may be a skill, for example. If your character is a computer whiz, maybe he or she is the only one who could hack into the government computer in time. It could also be a personality trait. Maybe the resilience she has developed over a lifetime of hardship is what enables her to survive the Holocaust. Now, a weakness is also very important. So let's say your character has always had an aversion to authority, and that makes it difficult for him now to listen to the one person who actually has the answers and could save him. Or maybe he's had a lifelong limp, and that has always made him feel weak, and his weakness makes him doubt his ability to achieve his goals. Either way, you're looking at a push and a pull. Their characters' strengths and their weaknesses are pushing and pulling against each other throughout the story, and that's what gives you tension. And tension is what keeps us hooked. The fourth thing your character needs is a distinct voice. A voice so much his own that we always know exactly when he's speaking. And by speaking I mean whether it's in dialogue or whether we're hearing the thoughts in his head. So what kind of voice does your character have? Is he sarcastic or mild-mannered? Is he quick to anger or very timid in his speech? And you want to make sure that his speech and his voice develop as his character develops. So if he starts out as timid in the beginning of the story, as he gains confidence as the story goes on, his voice should change and grow with him. Now I have a lot more tips on dialogue in future videos, but just remember that your main character's voice needs to be distinct and needs to be his own. The fifth thing your character needs is a want, or a motivation, and this is actually the most important thing. Because in its simplest form, a story is this: the introduction of character and the knowledge of what he or she wants. Now your job as the author is to put as many obstacles as you can in the way of him getting what he wants. That's what makes the story, and that's what keeps us hooked. So if you don't have a strong enough want or motivation, your story is going to falter and end too soon. If you're unclear on the character's motivation, then what usually happens is you're going to go off in tangents in the middle of the story, and you're going to lose direction because your character has lost direction. So oftentimes by going back to the beginning of the story and getting more clear on what he or she wants, you will be able to create those storylines that will keep the story moving forward. Now all of this is true whether you're writing a picture book or a full-length novel. Now a single want can carry an entire book, even a 1,000-page book. For example, in my novel Remember Wake, Colin wants one thing: to survive the war and to get back to Maggie. And he's willing to do anything it takes to achieve that goal. Now characters can also have secondary wants. One of Colin's secondary wants is to get revenge against the sadistic interpreter in the POW camp. You can have several secondary wants for your characters, but the main motivation is what keeps your story on track and drives the story forward. Now, in the end, does your character always get what he or she wants? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. That's up to you. Your character may learn along the way that what he thought he wanted wasn't what he really wanted after all. Or you may choose a tragic ending in which he doesn't get what he wanted through no fault of his own. That choice is always up to you. But again, if you are struggling with your story, you may need to look at character motivation and make sure that you and your character are clear on his path. Many writers find it useful to use what's called a character sketch. Now, a character sketch is a piece of paper with questions on it that helps you keep track of the details of the character's appearance, helps you flesh out the backstory, helps you develop motivation and want, and strengths and weaknesses. Now you can see here the first page of the character sketch that I developed that I use with my clients. If you would like to download the entire character sketch, you can go to my website at teresafunke.com/coaching and download the PDF for use in your own writing. If you are still struggling to develop character and motivation for your characters, you might want to consider giving me a call and we'll do a consultation. I have helped dozens of writers overcome obstacles in their writing to complete a story they are proud of. Now, you can reach me there again at teresafunke.com/coaching. The last thing I want to say, though, is remember to enjoy developing your characters. When you do a good job with it, they're going to become as real to you as your friends and family, and that can be a very satisfying relationship indeed. Thank you.